The year 1746 dawned with a sense of grim foreboding across the Scottish Highlands. The Jacobite cause, once burning so brightly, had begun to flicker and wane. Prince Charles Edward Stuart, the charismatic Bonnie Prince Charlie, had led his army of clansmen deep into the heart of England, reaching Derby and causing panic in London. Yet, the promised support from English Jacobites never materialized, a phantom hope that dissolved into the winter mist. The French, too, remained distant allies, their ships and soldiers a constant rumor, but never a reality on British shores. Faced with the advance of a numerically superior and well-supplied government army, the retreat north was inevitable. A long, weary march back to the familiar but unforgiving landscapes of Scotland. A victory at Falkirk Muir in January had momentarily boosted morale, a brief flash of the old fire. But the weeks that followed had been a slow, grinding attrition of spirit and body. The Jacobite army, now encamped near Inverness, was a shadow of its former self. Supplies dwindled to almost nothing, with soldiers subsisting on a few meager biscuits a day. Their clothes were ragged, their shoes worn through from endless marching. Desertion became a quiet plague, men slipping away in the night, driven by hunger and the desperate need to protect their families. The prince, however, remained resolute, his belief in his divine right to the throne unshaken by the mounting hardships. His opponent was William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, the son of the reigning monarch, King George II. Cumberland was a man forged in a different mold, a professional soldier known for his discipline and his ruthlessness. His army was a well-oiled machine, rested, well-fed, and equipped with the most modern weaponry of the age. They were camped near Nairn, celebrating their commander's 25th birthday with extra rations and brandy, their confidence high. It was this celebration that sparked a final, desperate gamble from the Jacobite leadership. A surprise night attack was proposed, a daring plan to fall upon the government troops in their drunken slumber. The march began under the cloak of darkness, a silent, ghostly procession of exhausted men. The terrain was treacherous, a morass of bog and heather that pulled at their feet and slowed their progress to a crawl. The darkness was absolute, disorienting the columns and causing them to lose contact with one another. Hours passed, the cold seeping into their bones, the promised destination still miles away. As the first faint hints of dawn streaked the eastern sky, the terrible truth became clear. The element of surprise was lost. The attack was aborted. A bitter, weary retreat began, not back to their original camp, but to the nearby Drumacy Moor, a place that would soon be known to history simply as Culloden. The choice of battlefield could not have been worse for the Jacobite army. Culloden Moor was a wide, flat, and open expanse, a perfect killing ground for artillery and cavalry. The soft, boggy ground would suck the life from a Highland charge, neutralizing their greatest tactical advantage. But there was no other choice. The men were too exhausted to go any further. They formed their lines on the windswept moor, a grim tableau under a sky the color of lead. A cold, driving rain began to fall, mixed with sleet that stung their faces and soaked their already threadbare plaids. The wind blew directly into their ranks, a relentless, demoralizing force. Across the moor, Cumberland's army deployed with chilling efficiency. Their redcoats stood out in stark, disciplined lines against the drab landscape. Their cannon, gleaming and deadly, were positioned with precision, ready to unleash hell upon the exposed Jacobite ranks. The government soldiers were fresh and ready, their bellies full, their muskets dry. They outnumbered the Jacobites almost 2 to 1. a force of around 9,000 against a weary 5,000. The air grew thick with tension. The only sounds the snapping of flags in the wind and the low murmur of prayers. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the ordeal began. The British artillery opened fire, a deafening roar that echoed across the moor. The cannonballs tore through the Jacobite lines, a brutal, impersonal slaughter. Men were ripped apart, their bodies mangled, their comrades spattered with blood and gore. For over half an hour, the clansmen were forced to endure this horrific bombardment, unable to retaliate effectively. Their own few cannons were old and poorly served, their shots falling harmlessly short. Frustration and rage grew with every passing minute, the men desperate to charge, to fight, to die on their feet rather than be pulverized from a distance. Finally, the order was given. Clananan gaidhil angwali beshil, Highlanders, shoulder to shoulder. With a fearsome roar that had struck terror into their enemies on other fields, the Highland charge began. But this was not Prestonpans or Falkirk. The charge was ragged and uncoordinated from the start. The boggy ground clung to their feet, slowing their momentum. The relentless cannon fire turned to grapeshot, a hail of metal that scythed through their ranks. On the left flank, the MacDonalds, proud and numerous, were stalled by the worst of the terrain and the galling fire, their charge faltering before it could even reach the enemy. Felt their honor had been slighted by being placed on the left, and their hesitation was fatal. On the right, however, the charge was pressed home with incredible ferocity. The men of Clan Chatan, the Macintoshes, and others surged forward through the storm of lead and iron. They crashed into the first government line, a whirlwind of flashing broadswords and guttural war cries. For a moment, the red line buckled, the sheer ferocity of the Highland warriors overwhelming the soldiers in their path. Bayonets were swept aside, and the clansmen carved a bloody path into the heart of the government formation. But Cumberland had prepared for this. He had drilled his men in a new, deadly bayonet technique. Each soldier was to ignore the man directly in front of him, and instead thrust his bayonet into the exposed right side of the Highlander, attacking his neighbor. The tactic was brutally effective. The charging clansmen, their charges protecting them from the front, were suddenly impaled from the side. Their momentum stopped, their lives extinguished in an instant of shock and pain. The second government line held firm, pouring volley after volley of disciplined musket fire into the now stalled and disordered mass of Highlanders. The charge, the Jacobites' ultimate weapon, was broken. The impetus was lost, replaced by confusion and slaughter. As the heart of the charge was being ripped out, Cumberland played his final, decisive card. He unleashed his cavalry, the dragoons, who swept around the flanks of the Jacobite army. They crashed into the already wavering lines, their heavy sabers rising and falling with merciless precision. This was no longer a battle. It was a rout. Panic spread through the Jacobite ranks. Men threw down their weapons and fled, seeking safety in the bleak, unforgiving landscape. Government soldiers pursued them relentlessly, giving no quarter. The battle itself had lasted less than an hour, a short, sharp, and bloody affair. But the killing did not stop when the fighting ended. Cumberland, earning his infamous moniker, the Butcher, ordered that all wounded Jacobites on the field were to be put to the sword. For days after, patrols scoured the countryside, hunting down fugitives, burning homes, and terrorizing the local population. The prisons of Inverness swelled with captured rebels, many of whom would face execution or transportation to the colonies. The government was determined not just to win a battle, but to extinguish the Jacobite cause forever. Prince Charles Edward Stuart had watched the disaster unfold from a position in the rear. Saying that all was lost, he was led from the field, a fugitive in the kingdom he had come to claim. Thus began his 5-month ordeal as a hunted man, a romanticized but brutal period of hiding in glens and islands, relying on the loyalty of a few brave souls who risked everything to protect him. He would eventually escape to France, a broken and disillusioned man, never to set foot on Scottish soil again. His dream of a Stuart restoration died on the blood-soaked ground of Culloden Moor. The aftermath of the battle was a systematic and ruthless dismantling of the Highland way of life. The government in London, determined to prevent any future risings, passed a series of punitive laws. The Disarming Act banned the carrying of weapons. The Dress Act outlawed the wearing of tartan and the kilt, symbols of clan identity. The ancient clan system itself was broken, the hereditary jurisdictions of the chiefs abolished. The Gaelic language was suppressed, and the culture that had sustained the Highlands for centuries was driven into the shadows. The Duke of Cumberland's brutal suppression was intended to be a final and absolute solution. The Battle of Culloden was more than just a military defeat. It was a cultural cataclysm. It was the last pitched battle ever fought on British soil, a final, violent clash between two different worlds. One was the world of the feudal clans, a society built on loyalty, tradition, and the warrior ethos. The other was the modern, centralized state, with its professional army and its implacable will. On that bleak April day, the modern world won, and the old world was shattered forever. The echoes of that shattering can still be heard in the mournful silence of Culloden Moor today, a place of pilgrimage and remembrance, a testament to the final, bloody end of the Jacobite Rebellion. The heather on the moor is said to be stained with the blood of the fallen, a permanent reminder of the price of loyalty and the cost of defeat. The names of the clans are marked by simple stones, a silent roll call of the men who charged into history and oblivion. The wind still carries their story, a lament for a lost cause and a vanished way of life. The battle marked a turning point in the history of Scotland, ushering in an era of profound social and economic change. The romantic image of the Highlander would endure, but the reality of their world was erased in the fire and smoke of that single, terrible hour. The government's victory was absolute, securing the Hanoverian succession and unifying Great Britain under a single, powerful authority. The dream of a Stuart king was relegated to the realm of myth and song, a poignant what if in the grand sweep of history. The battlefield remains a somber, sacred place where the weight of the past is palpable. Visitors walk the lines, trying to comprehend the bravery and the horror of that day. The story of Culloden is a story of courage, of desperation, of brutality, and of profound loss. It serves as a stark reminder that history is written by the victors, but the memory of the vanquished can never be truly erased. The battle's legacy is complex, a mixture of national trauma and romantic legend. The figure of Bonnie Prince Charlie continues to fascinate, a symbol of youthful ambition and tragic failure. The loyalty of his followers, who sacrificed everything for his cause, remains a powerful testament to the bonds of kinship and belief. The government's response, while brutal, was also a reflection of the high stakes involved, the fear of a return to civil war and instability. Culloden was the final act in a long and bloody drama that had spanned generations. It was the end of a rebellion, but also the beginning of a new chapter for Scotland and for Britain. The moor itself is the most powerful monument, a vast, open grave holding the secrets and sorrows of that fateful day. The landscape, scarred by history, speaks more eloquently than any book. The silence of the field is broken only by the wind, a constant, mournful sigh. Each stone, Each blade of grass seems to whisper a story of the men who fought and died there. The battle was a tragedy not just for the Jacobites, but for Scotland as a whole. It created deep and lasting divisions within the country. Families were torn apart, loyalties tested to the breaking point. Memory of the Butcher Cumberland would long be reviled in the Highlands. The government's policies transformed the social fabric of the region, leading to the Highland clearances in the following decades. The old clan chiefs were replaced by landlords, and the people were displaced from their ancestral lands. The romanticism of the Jacobite cause often obscures the harsh political realities of the time. It was a struggle for power, a dynastic conflict with deep roots in religion and national identity. The battle was a collision of ideologies, a fight for the very soul of the nation. The bravery of the clansmen in the face of impossible odds is a source of enduring pride. Their charge into the teeth of the cannons was an act of incredible, almost suicidal, courage. The discipline of the government troops was equally remarkable, a testament to their training and professionalism. Culloden was a showcase of the changing nature of warfare, where firepower was beginning to triumph over ferocity. The broadsword and targe were no match for the musket and bayonet in a pitched battle. The failure of the night march was a critical turning point, a moment of lost opportunity that sealed the Jacobites' fate. The exhaustion of the men was a decisive factor, a physical and mental burden that they could not overcome. The choice of battlefield remains a subject of debate among historians, a fatal error in judgment. The weather itself seemed to be an enemy of the Jacobites, a final, cruel twist of fate. The rain and sleet hampered their vision and made the ground even more treacherous. The story of the battle is often told through the lens of its most famous participants, but it was the ordinary soldiers who paid the ultimate price. Their individual stories are lost to history, their names forgotten, but their sacrifice is remembered. Aftermath of the battle was a period of profound trauma and change for the Highlands. The suppression of the culture was a deliberate act of political and social engineering. The government sought to create a new kind of Highlander, one who was loyal to the crown and integrated into the modern British state. The legacy of Culloden is still felt today in the politics, culture, and identity of Scotland. It is a story that continues to be told and retold, a source of endless fascination and debate. The battlefield is a place where the past feels intensely present, a landscape haunted by ghosts and memories. To walk on Culloden Moor is to walk on sacred ground, to feel the weight of history under your feet. The battle was a brutal end to a romantic dream, a final, bloody chapter in the story of the Jacobite risings. The hope that had carried the Jacobites from Glenfinnan to Derby was extinguished in less than an hour. The silence that fell over the moor after the battle was the silence of a world that had ceased to exist. The story of Culloden is a timeless tale of ambition, loyalty, and the tragic consequences of war. It is a reminder that victory and defeat are often separated by a very thin line. The courage of the vanquished is no less real than the triumph of the victors. The moor endures, a silent witness to the day the clans were broken. The memory of the battle serves as a powerful symbol of Scottish identity and resilience. The story is a cornerstone of Scottish history, a defining moment that shaped the nation's future. The final charge of the Highlanders was a desperate, heroic, and ultimately futile gesture. The battle's outcome was determined by superior numbers, superior firepower, and superior discipline. The government's victory was total and uncompromising. The Jacobite dream of a Stuart restoration was shattered beyond repair. The battle marked the end of an era, the final gasp of a feudal society in the face of a modernizing world. The moor is a place of quiet contemplation, a space to reflect on the human cost of conflict. The story of Culloden is a story that belongs not just to Scotland, but to the world. It is a universal story of struggle, sacrifice, and the enduring power of memory. The wind on the moor whispers the names of the fallen, ensuring they are never forgotten. The battle was a brutal, bloody, and decisive end to a long and storied rebellion. The sun set on the Jacobite cause that day, and it would never rise again.